Good morning, everyone.
Fantastic. Good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Warm welcome, everyone, to our L&D backstage session. I'm very, very happy to have Anna and Daniel with us today and talking about failing forward. I think this is a common topic or a common struggle to most of the startups. How do you manage then your growth pains? And I'm very excited to hear what Anna and Daniel will have to share with us. So without further ado, Anna, Daniel, over to you.
Excellent.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much. Brilliant. So yes, today we're hoping to share some of our experiences at Ginic around building teams, some of the issues that we had, some of the growing pains that we had, and some of the ways that we ran around combating that. Whilst we're doing that, what we're hoping to do as a little bit of an exercise is just in the chat, if you could list out the best team name you've ever heard. Could be a pub quiz team name, could be a work team name, could be a superhero team name. What's the best team name you've ever heard? And while you're doing that, we might quickly introduce ourselves. So my name's Daniel. I've been in kind of project management, agile management, video game production for coming on about 20 years now. So I actually started off in the video games industry, working for the likes of THQ, Sony, Activision. Last engagement I had was with Halfbrick, who did the Fruit Ninja and Jetpack Joyride games. So really, really creative environments, lots of amazing creative people, very dynamic, things changing constantly, technologies changing constantly, etc. After that, I then moved into Queensland government. So Queensland's a state of Australia, and I was in the area that looked after their website, so basically qld.gov.au. And it was the polar opposite to video games. So very bureaucratic, very structured, very layered communications, was very difficult, etc. I've been with Ginic now for about 5 years, and again, it's like a really interesting mash between the two. So there's some amazing creative people, but there's also a little bit of obviously we work with clients, we're a consultancy firm, so there's contractual obligations, there's things that we're meant to be delivering. So it's really interesting that kind of balance between the two. So I'll throw over to Anna.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, so my name is Anna. You can call me Anna Banana if you like. I eat a lot of bananas every day, that's why. And it tastes really good with coffee. If you never tried eating a banana with coffee, I highly recommend it. My background is, I guess, originally in graphic design. I was studying graphic design with the printing technology as well. So I was really deep into anything that was printed, and I guess, yeah, almost 20 years later, it's evolved into user experience design and also specializing in design thinking, which I think is super awesome to do. And I try to, get everyone to get into design thinking, because you don't have to be a designer to do it. Yes, I've been through a lot of different workplaces. I've been with Ginic for 7.5 years now, and that's the longest I've ever been in one place. And the reason why is that it's so different from any other workplace. And even, I guess, before I worked at Ginic, I didn't even know that that workplaces could be like that. And I guess that's the benefit with joining a startup early and kind of grow with it. And it's been a really fascinating journey, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's hit to the next slide, I guess.
Fantastic. Yeah. So to give you a little bit of context behind the stories that we're sharing in terms of team building, Ginic is a consultancy firm, and we deal primarily in analytics. So really getting value from data. One of the things that we do that's a little bit different is that we do have a human-centered approach, and we do follow agile principles. We've got about 100 professionals. So when I joined, it was around about 50 people, and it's grown to well over 100. We're experience led, so it's about making sure that we're focusing on the user value, that experience that the end user has. At the end of the day, when we're engaging in a project, we're trying to make someone's life better. There's a problem, they're not getting the data they need, they're not visualizing it, there's a platform issue. We're trying to make their life a little bit easier at work. So who is that user and how can we derive that value? And our focus is being friendly. Like we're super approachable. One of the agile values is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And that we really live that. We want to work with people to make sure that they're getting value, basically, not to sort of hammer too much on that point. Anna?
Awesome. Yeah. So today we're going to share some reflections and insights around our work at Agenic and what we've experienced, and especially how we grow and connect as a team. And next slide, please. So let's get back to, before we kind of dig into it, let's get back and see if anyone has written anything in the chat when it comes to best team name. L&D gurus. I like that. And there's someone mentioned a festival organizing team in Germany called Fusion. Fusion, I think, is always a nice word when it comes to teams. And I think we have our own, both DJ and I are part of the same team, or at least internal team within Agenic, and we're called the Party Mix at the moment. And I guess no one here, maybe besides from us, live in Australia. There's a lolly that's called Party Mix, so they're different flavored lolly in one bag. So that's where we took that name. I'm not sure if that exists outside of Australia. Maybe it does. So let me know if it does. So I wanted to start with a really high level view of Agenic's journey. So Agenic was founded in 2014 by Brett and Marty in Brisbane, and it started growing pretty fast. I joined the team in 2016. There were about 12 people, I think, when I started. And since then, we were growing pretty fast in the next 2 years. And that's when, around 2018, we realized we needed a bit more structure because we were growing also across Australia into a few different locations. And then DJ joined, and he kind of got to see some of the changes that have already happened.
Yeah, so when I joined, I think there was like the second iteration of the corporate structure in place, which I really enjoyed. And then whilst I was there, as I mentioned before, we went from about 50 to 100, and we were sort of growing past that 100 mark. And the interesting thing was kind of like just observing like how much the communication can get fragmented the more people you add, and trying to understand who needs to be involved, who doesn't need to be involved, what's the best way of approaching that. So that was certainly something that, you know, was really interesting to see that unfold.
So also a little bit of, I guess, going a bit deeper into who we are at Agenic. Early on, we created a brand personality for, if Agenic was a person, what would they be like? So we call them the friendly astronaut. And we also created a mascot for it. And we, at around the same time, we created very strong, specific values. And through those values, we have 3 guiding principles. One of them is team up for better outcomes. We know if we really work as one team with clients, we can just get so much more value done. The other one is nurture genuine relationships with anyone we work with, both within our company, but also as we work with different clients. And also keep chasing the unicorn, try to come up with new cool ideas, new ways to innovate. So those are really kind of the core principles of how we do things. And as I said earlier, 2018, we were growing fast. A lot of things were happening, and we were still kind of being pretty fluid when it came to projects and allocating people for different work. And it kind of worked up to a point, and we realized that we did need more structure around our way of working as we were growing, you know, close to that 50 mark. So what we did was created a voluntary group of people within Agenic that would come up with a few ideas on how we can create some kind of structure of how we work. And what was decided was to create a working model, a way of working model that was inspired by Spotify. So this illustration is from one of Spotify's own articles. And that's really looking at, you can divide your teams into squads, which are multi-skilled people, like combined into lots of different teams. And then you have chapters, that's all about capabilities. And if we go to next slide, I can describe it a little bit more in detail on how we did it at Agenic. So what we focused mostly on was creating little teams, small sticky project teams that we call squads. And within each team, we have each of the different capabilities that we have within Agenic. And we also created something called chapters, which is the specific capability groups. So at Agenic, it's analytics, engineering, design, and also agile delivery. So we were structuring those squads with capabilities from each one of those chapters. And what the thinking was that we would always work on projects within a squad from start to finish. And the squads would also stick together for a pretty long time. And let's jump into the next slide, please, DJ. So I was part of one of the first testing squads. So before we actually rolled this idea out, we had 2 test squads in Brisbane. So I was part of one of them. So that was going on for 3 months before we decided to roll it out and test it with a larger group. And I was part of that squad. It was probably for about 2 years since then. We called ourselves Mullet Mafia. Don't ask why. It was a very long process to get to that name. But it was a really awesome experience to be part of that and really, trying to find those projects that we can all work on together. So it was really about making sure we have those different specialties within the group so we can go and work on projects that have similar needs. Next slide. So it's one thing that was really important too, was because we worked together in small groups. It was usually between 7 and 9 people in each squad. So you're with that team long term. It's kind of like having a family within a larger company, and you kind of create that psychological safety. You know everyone's kind of needs, and you know what makes your team members happy if they're a bit down, and you go out and do a few social things as well. So it was really good to kind of create that stronger connections with people because you always work on the same projects. And next slide. So chapters, that's all about the technical capabilities. So what's also really important is to catch up within your chapters and your capability and learn new things and have some career development. And coming for advice when you're working on a tricky project, you can go to your chapter. So that's how that balance was working between squads and chapters. But we did start having a problem after a while, not straight away, but after a few months. We realized that many projects had very unique capability needs. So we realized, even though we were sitting on the same spot in the office and we're sitting next to each other and we're hanging out, but we're actually working on completely different projects. Maybe 2 of us are on one project, another one on another project, and then 3 are on another project, because there were very specific skills sometimes. Even within, say, a chapter, there were a specific skill needed for a specific project. So sometimes people needed to cherry pick certain people for certain capabilities or even experience levels. And this is where a new model comes in, where we realized, okay, we need to come up with something new again or maybe rework what we're doing. So around this time, there was a new way of working group that was formed with volunteers that really wanted to tackle this and come up with a new way of working. And this is where DJ comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd probably been with Agenic for about a year or so before we started growing to that size, and really recognizing the problem that not every single project needs an entire squad. Like, it's not just the skill sets, it's also the size of that project. Like, if someone's got something really small and we're trying to propose, a team of 6 people, it doesn't really make sense. We're not delivering that value. So as part of that way of working group, what we did was we took an approach called a charrette, which is basically, we got we broke the problem down into smaller ideas, and then we had little subgroups that would start on one idea and then rotate onto the next idea, and then you'd keep rotating around so that each group had a little bit of a go on each of the problem areas, and they would come in at different areas. You'd either be starting, or you'd come in and it had already started, and so the group would explain it to you. You come in with the fresh eyes, and you apply fresh thinking. And one of the simplest approaches we did was and it sounds really obvious, but we just added an extra layer. So we have our chapters at the top here. That's that technical alignment. That's where you're focusing on your career path. That's where you're learning from your peers. That's where you're coaching people if you've got quite a bit of experience, etc. You then have your squad level, which is, we'll go into that in a bit more detail, but that's your safe zone. That's your social aspect. That's somewhere you can fall back on if you're struggling and you need some help, or you think you can help someone else. And then in front of that is your project area. So you can see here we're scaling up. We've got a large project here. We've got quite a few people involved. We've got some people from the client side involved. Maybe project 2 is a little bit smaller, so we don't need as many people. And we're just drawing those people from the different squads. So it gives us that flexibility. We can ramp up, ramp down. When you're in that project space, like say you're on a small project here and perhaps you don't have a designer in this gig, but you need some design thinking advice, you can just go back to your squad and you'll have a designer in your squad that you're friendly with. You can ask safe questions, and they can give you that support that you need. So the idea is that what we try and do is balance that friendship, the technical growth, and the collaboration. Like, those are the kind of, like, that's the Venn diagram of what we're looking to do, and really trying to hit that sweet spot in the middle. As part of the forming of a project team, there's several things that we need to go through just to kind of build that safety. Obviously, the project teams, they're spun up and they're disbanded very, very quickly. It could be a project that only lasts a month. It could be a project that lasts a year. So it's very difficult to gauge how long someone's going to be involved, how much adaptation you need to have. So we really needed to refine that ability to foster a safe environment, foster a great team, and doing that through that onboarding process. And we did that with a series of kind of exercises and a series of tools. So the first one that I love to do, particularly if it's a team that's never worked before, is to just go through a user manual. So this is my personal user manual. If you want to work with me, these are the things that are really important to me. And we've broken it up into several different questions, and you can refine this as you see fit. At the end of this talk, we'll quickly jump on a mirror board. All of these templates are on there, and you're able to help yourself if anything of here grabs your eye. But the great thing about the user manual is it sparks those conversations, particularly around things like, how are you misunderstood? Or, what do you want help to look like? What's your communications preferences? How do you prefer to receive feedback? Things like that, just eliminating those assumptions and identifying how some people have a different way of working. I've seen quite a few times under this, when are you misunderstood, is some people are just quiet. Some people aren't particularly communicative, like, especially if they're in the zone. It's not rudeness. It's not that they're ignoring you. It's just that they're in that zone. And by bringing that up at the start and understanding that, you don't come at it with, a wrong lens. If you see someone and they're in a corner, they're on the laptop, they're really focused, to leave them alone. But other people, they're gregarious. They like to talk, they like to chat. So tap them on the shoulders, see how they're doing. So it's a really good idea, or a really good approach to kind of build that conversation. I usually like to add something like a favorite food or a hobby, particularly the hobby one. My goodness, some people have some random hobbies, and it's really interesting to learn about them. Once we've identified who we are as individuals and what our preferences are and how we work together, the important thing is to align as a team on the project. So we like to align internally before we step on site on the client side, just to give everybody that confidence. For me, the fear comes from the unknown. The fear comes from things that we're not clear about. And the idea of this session is to eliminate those fears, eliminates those assumptions, make sure people understand what's going on. So we usually have a group of themed questions. So there's questions for the delivery team. There's questions about the project specifically. There's another set of questions for the product owner, perhaps the BD manager, all that sort of stuff. And it's just making sure we got alignment. Like, do we understand the business problem we're trying to solve? Do we recognize any gaps in the skills? Are there any risks, any key dependencies? Something that I really like about Aginic is internally we're very open about the budget as well. So everybody can see what their day rate is. Everybody can see how many hours they've got allocated. Is it enough? Are we comfortable? Is it at risk? So just being open and honest and giving everybody the information they need to do the best job that they can. Once we do that, another great exercise to get alignment is to have a shared vision. This is something we'll generally do with the client as well. What is it we're trying to achieve? A good example of that, I think, is the persona that we showed before of the friendly astronaut. Like, that's who we're trying to be. We're trying to be friendly, explorative, brave, exciting. So within the project, what's the vision? What is it you want us to do? Roles and responsibilities seems like a simple one, but actually writing out is such a fantastic exercise. We generally follow Scrum. And as a result, we usually have a product owner, we have a development team, and then we have the Scrum Master. So identifying who those key people are, what their roles are, is a really good way of doing that. If you don't use Scrum, then we've got another template here, very simple. What's your name? What's your role title? What's your project role? And an important thing is, what's your availability? Like, we can't assume that everybody's got 100% availability, particularly if we're talking about SMEs or, high-level stakeholders. They might only have 20% of their time or 10% of their time they can give to this. So that's valuable information, because we know that when we grab their time, we've got to make the most of it. Or we know that we need to give them a lot of notice before we pull them into a meeting or before we pull them into a sprint review. Talking of which, as I mentioned before, we do follow Scrum, which has a series of ceremonies. I've got a little slide that goes into it later on. But even if you're not doing Scrum, there's bound to be some meetings or there's bound to be some sessions that are recurring. So what are those? What does a week look like? What does a fortnight look like? What does a month look like? If there's repetition, start booking those sessions in. That's the beauty of Scrum, is that generally we do a 2-week sprint, kicks off with planning, ends with a sprint review and a retrospective, and there's a daily stand-up. We can book those in. If we know we're doing a 3-month gig, we can do 3 months worth of sprint reviews. We can book those in straight away, secure the time, make sure people understand, when. The other thing I like about Scrum is that those are all the meetings that we're doing. We can book that in and we can dedicate the rest of the time for doing and making sure we're delivering that value. Oh, just go back one slide as well. A quick question to ask around that as well is dedicated L&D time. So we try, and it's not always possible depending on the gig, but if it's a relatively large gig, to make sure we're not getting burnout from the team, what we do is we dedicate Friday afternoons to L&D. So we're upfront with the client. We will charge you a 9-day sprint, not 10 days. So it'll only be 9 days. And then half day Friday, that's dedicated to internal L&D. Gives people a chance to step away, think about something else, learn. And it's amazing, because sometimes when you step away from a problem, that's when the solution becomes the most obvious. One team alignment. Again, this is kind of like identifying some of those roles and responsibilities. This is a really important one here. Who makes the decisions? We want to try and avoid a board of directors or, a decision by a group of people. We want one person. Quick, give us a decision. What should we do? Give us a try. And it's not about identifying a neck to wring or identifying someone to blame. It's just eliminating too much debate or eliminating lockerheads. If push comes to shove, who's our referee? Who's going to make the call? Another one is calendar invites and meeting requests. It's normally good to have one person dedicated to that. There's a couple of reasons for that. It's not like a lot of people see that as being like just a PA role. It's actually a really important role, particularly when you're talking about meetings. You want to make sure the right people are in the room. You want to make sure that there's an agenda. We don't want meetings just for the sake of meetings. So having someone to sort of coordinate that and have an understanding of what those sessions are, particularly as I mentioned before, we do Scrum. So for me, if we're having a recurring session that isn't a Scrum ceremony, we need to validate that. Why are we doing that? We're investing people's time in this. Are we getting the value for that? Once we've done all of these sessions, effectively it turns into our team charter. So we usually use Miro or Butter or tools of that particular nature where we can collaborate together and build like a virtual sticky wall. And that's something we can come back to. I think it's really important that documents should be living. The last thing we want to do is build a document, stick it on a dusty shelf, and it's never used. Something like this has all of that information in one place. It's something we can come back to. It's something we can reflect on. And as a team, we can make sure that we're working together. And if we bring in any new team members, here's a great starting point for you to get the context of what we've done today. So I've mentioned Scrum 101 times, and I did promise you a little diagram of what Scrum looks like. So this is basically what Scrum looks like. I won't go too much into it. There's amazing articles out there. I strongly recommend looking into it. But as I said before, these ceremonies are opportunities for us to build further on that team dynamic. So the sprint planning, it's the team's responsibility to identify what they're going to do in those 2 weeks. There's no command and control here. There's no project manager saying in 2 weeks' time, this is what you would deliver. Instead, the product owner will say, in 2 weeks' time, this is what we would like the users to be able to do, or this is the problem statement that we have. It's up to the team to identify what can be done in those 2 weeks, negotiate with the product owner, and come up with their own plan for those 2 weeks. Every day we have a stand-up, and a common anti-pattern that we see with stand-ups is that it turns into just a briefing. This is what I'm doing. It's an update to a project manager. That's not what we want at all. It's actually a micro version of the sprint planning. So it's a planning for the day. This is what happened yesterday, as a result of which this is what I'm going to focus on today. Let's work together. I've got a blocker. Okay, I can help you with that. I'm a little bit quiet today. Who needs a hand? It's a planning session. It's not an update per se. At the end of that 2-week sprint, we have a sprint review. That's where we demonstrate the work that we've done to the end user. It's an opportunity to get feedback. Something that I think is really important in building team cohesiveness is purpose-driven development. So that's why we talk about visions. That's why we talk about objectives. That's why we talk about goals. Because as a team, that's what we're working towards. And this is the opportunity to go to the user and say, this is what we've done. Give us your feedback. And having that direct communication really hammers home, like we're actually impacting someone. We're actually doing something with someone. This is what they appreciate. This is what they prefer. And you can take that back with you. The retrospective is a ceremony that is purely for the team themselves. Again, another fantastic opportunity for team building. What are we doing well? What can we do better on? What are opportunities for improvement? And that's all driven by the team. So even if you're not following Scrum, it's a great idea to have a look at the sessions you're running and identify where can we enable the team? Where can we empower the team to run with it? You know, is it a one-on-one conversation, or is it a group of people working together? This is just a little demonstration of when you do a series of sprint, that little increment that we get at the end gets bigger and bigger. We keep building on it, but the key thing is that we're continuously engaging with those users. So we're building that vision, we're building that unified approach, that purpose-driven development through that communication. Anna?
Yeah, so something else that we do during delivery is that we bake in a lot of design thinking activities throughout the project. And this is done really collaboratively. So we work closely with actual end users to come up with ideas that could work with them. And that's really important as you go through projects. So you try to also bake in a few participants in workshops and solution-focused meetings that are not just, say, the core team that's through a project, like a mix of clients and Agenic people, but also users. So it's really having that focus on co-creation and collaboration that we're trying to do. And we really see that, the value coming out after every sprint doing that.
So after we've delivered, something that we like to do is almost like a retrospective for the entire project. So what we do is we get everybody involved, and we really like to deep dive on, what worked well, what didn't work well, some ideas for next time. And the approach we take is what's called a lean coffee. And so I usually have like an ideation board. I'll throw in some questions there just to get people thinking, get the juices flowing, because sometimes it's really hard just to be presented with a blank board and go, right, put up some ideas. So I'll usually put something nice and visual just to try and prompt some discussion and some thought. What happens then is once everybody's thrown up their topic ideas, as a group, we'll vote on them. And then we'll arrange them highest priority down to lowest priority. And then we have a simple time box. So we got 10 minutes to talk about priority 1. Again, I usually put some little prompting questions here, like what's the actual problem? What's the actual piece we're talking about? So what? What's the big deal? And then the last question, which you can't see, has been clipped off there, is what now? So now that we have this information, what do we want to do now? So nice little template. Time boxing them to 10 minutes really makes sharpens the conversation, so to speak. Like we've got 10 minutes being on top of that, and then we'll move on to the next one. And usually I like to focus on the top 3. So that whole session there, you're looking at about an hour and 15 minutes to go through. Anna?
Yes, so something we like to do in after we delivered a project is sharing our fails and learnings with the full team. So we often do this during a Monday morning meeting. That's one of the sessions we can do it, where everyone dials into a meeting before the week starts, and people share different things, updates, and also things that we learned throughout projects. And we also do it sometimes squad to squad. Especially when it's more, I guess, more interesting fails that you kind of want to talk about in more details for a longer amount of time and come up with some solutions on how to fix it. And I think the next one is also talking about this, imagine it better. So this is a group that come together with different volunteers that reflect on past projects and try to come up with improvements. So that's usually more strategically focused and also aligned with the principles. How can we keep on doing the things that we want to do, and how can we do it even better in the future? And before we jump into tools, DJ, I was thinking, could you jump to slide 19 again? Maybe even jump in and out, because I just added a little sticky or a little info box there.
Yeah, sure. Let me go back up. Hang on a sec. Slide 19. Oh, was it this one?
The one above, I think.
The one above.
Apologies. Or 2 above. Oh. Yeah, this one. Yeah.
There we go. Yes, there we go.
So I just wanted to add here, because we introduced this new concept of project teams. So squads still stay together as continuous sticky teams. And that's really where we get to nurture that psychological safety. But I also wanted to point out that project teams, why we talked so much about it, and we have all these different tools to try to create that safety a bit quicker, because projects are usually not that long term, is because about 80% of the time, people will be working on projects. So this limited time that you have between squads and learning things in chapters. So that's why we're really trying to kind of bake in as much as possible within project teams, but you always have that, I guess, safety to go back to your squad and get help on things, or, do more social things, or get advice on anything from work to maybe personal life. So it's having that balance. You have a support system outside of just the project team. That's all I wanted to say.
Fantastic.
And
So
we could, go back to the tool. So what we wanted to share, I know we're kind of running out of time. We will also want some time for questions. But we can just mention it here. We have one Miro board that we want to share with you. So I can share the link with you, and we have a password that's team, while DJ is just showing the look of the board.
yeah, so basically everything that we've spoken about this morning, there's a blank template for it in here. So yeah, if there's any value in any of those, feel free to help yourself. You're more than welcome to.
Yep, so I have added the link in there. You can copy and paste into a just in your web browser, and the password is team. I'm not sure if somebody knows why I called it team. It's from an IT Crowd episode, the first episode. If you haven't watched IT Crowd, I highly recommend to watch the first episode of it. It's really funny.
I am a fan, but I must have missed the reference. I'll have to go back and watch it again.
It's like the first scene, more or less.
Oh, okay.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Well, that's about it for the talk. Yeah. So thank you so much for listening. Conscious that that was a ton of information just blasted your way. We normally do this session over an hour, so we had to sort of trim it back and talk quite quickly. But yeah, if you've got any questions, or if there's anything you'd like to add, or any experiences you've had, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I saw one question in the chat. This was from Anna Silva. I think it was while I was speaking, but I didn't see the comment. Couldn't this also be seen as a positive to have cross experience in the team? Was this referring to when I was talking about the problem?
Yeah, exactly. So at the time, I could understand this as then your learning curve, and this was being seen as a problem, which I can understand. But at the same time, I was wondering if you could also have a positive light on it, that you have the team also widespread and gaining different cross-functional knowledge that then can also be used at a later point. So this was just like a mind shift that I wanted to understand a little bit better.
Oh yeah, so you mean, okay, so we love doing any kind of cross experience and people, learning from each other as much as possible. And I guess the true problem was that sometimes, I guess there are two parts of it. Like the true problem was that sometimes on a project you might need 9 analysts and you don't need an engineer or designer or something else, and you have to pick people and they come together in different groups. So that was kind of one problem. And then the other problem, you're referring to that it's good for people in the squad to go and kind of cross-pollinate other teams. Is that what you mean, Anna?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And I guess that's what we did realize, that it was hard to keep these sticky teams exactly on the same project, and it definitely was valuing moving people around. What we did have part of that original model was giving people the option to move between squads every 6 months, so people could opt into, yes, I want to move to another squad, and then you kind of move a couple of people around depending on who is opting in to kind of, I want to see what it's like in another squad, because each squad had kind of a different work culture depending on the team dynamics between the team members. So we still kept that option, but it was not as flexible as it is now, as we kind of removed the project focus for the squads, and the squads are purely for social reasons, to kind of have a team to get back to and do all those things and have a support system long term.
And it certainly feeds into that cross-pollination before, as I mentioned before, like if you're on a project and perhaps your project team doesn't have a particular skill set, that's somewhere for you to fall back on. say if I'm on a really big, gnarly, complex delivery project, then I've got my delivery chapter that I can go back to. Whereas if it's a design problem or an analytics problem, I've got my squad that I can go back to.
And Maria, you have your hand up?
Yes, there you go. You hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Okay, I would like to know, how did you come up with who is in what project?
Oh, you mean for the project teams?
Yeah, the project teams. How do you organize the project teams? So who goes from squad 3, who goes from squad 2? I don't know. Like, how do you really organize that project?
That's a really great question, because there is actually a little bit of behind the scenes that I think we could probably add to this talk for future iterations.
Definitely.
So what happens is, as part of your career path, you can identify particular roles and particular projects that you want to be a part of. And so you share that with your chapter. Each chapter has a chapter chair, and they're part of a resourcing group. So as new projects are being identified, whether it's like we're responding to a government tender, whether a client has approached us with a problem, or any other means, generally it will go through that chapter to go, right, based on the problem, these are the people we think we need, these are the resources that we think we need, these are the people that have expressed interest. And conversely as well, there are people that don't want to be involved in certain projects. So like say we had a Wine Australia gig, and someone didn't want to work with that because they had negative connotations on alcohol, and that's absolutely fine. Like, we'll, understanding that, make sure that we get the right people getting the right work and they're excited about it.
So that means that everybody knows about every project.
Just the chapter chairs. So
the chapter will share that with the squads.
Exactly. So what happens is, as part of that evaluation process of the project, when you come up with the proposed team, we use software called Float, which identifies who's on what projects and who has availability. We can go, okay, this is starting in a couple of months' time. These are the people that are available. These 2 or 3 would be ideal for it. And then you approach them, and then we would lock that into Float.
Okay, so every chapter has like the tool to be able to know who is working on what project, what does the project do, and be able to share it with the squad. So if anybody in the squad is interested in being in X project, then you can move people around.
Exactly.
Is that so?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you very much.
No worries at all.
And we got Mina, you have a hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Hi. I have, I think, a couple of questions. Some are very short. What do you think is the right size for a company or for a big team to be able to apply such a model? That's one. And the second one is, one of the big issues that we have in the teams is usually like everybody feels like there is either too much information sharing or too little information sharing, and it's always hard to find the right amount of information sharing so that people don't feel in silos. How do you manage that information sharing in the squad and project environment?
That's a really good question. I think to kick off with the information sharing one, we use a couple of different platforms. So we generally use Slack as an instant messenger. And so let's say if we're in the process of kicking off a project and we're looking to identify the people that want to be involved, we'll generate a Slack group and invite people into that. And then that's where the discussion happens. There's other Slack groups that people can join because they've got a vested interest. So there's a Slack group for each of the chapters. There's a Slack group for, we've got a D&D group. So if you're interested in D&D, you can join that Slack group. So it's very much self-service for some of those ones. So that communication strategy will change depending on what it is we're actually trying to communicate. Finally, we have a Monday morning meeting. So that's almost like a town hall meeting where it's a 30-minute meeting. It's usually run by the directors, and we'll just go through, what's been happening, what the plan for the week is, any major shifts, celebrate any anniversaries for people that have been there a long time, identify any big events, any big conferences that are coming up. And again, that's another really good way of communicating, and we record those as well, so if people can't make it, they can just quickly scrub through the recording. Hopefully that answers your question. In terms of the size, well, for us the main reason we added that project layer is because we're a consultancy. If we remove that project layer, then we have the chapters and we have the squads, which is the Spotify model. And I believe there's quite a few people that work for Spotify. I'm sure if I Googled it, it would tell me how many people work in Spotify. Let's see. They employ about 4,500 people.
Got it.
So I think for us, this model, having that extra layer to accommodate for the randomness of our projects and the integrating with the clients, adding that extra layer just gives her that flexibility to scale up and scale down as needed. There's another really interesting model. Sorry, I'm conscious there's a couple of hands up, but just very, very quickly. There's a video games company called Valve. They made Steam, they made Half-Life, they did a bunch of really big games. Their approach is nobody has a job title. What you have is you have a desk on wheels, and you wheel that desk to where you're needed. So if you have some design skills and there's a team over there that's working on some design stuff, you can head over there to help them. But if you've also got a little bit of engineering interest, or you're a QA tester, you can wheel it over there, plug your desk in, help them out. And that's another really interesting approach.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Maria.
Yeah, a quick question. Just those Monday meetings are for everybody, no matter if you're a
Yes.
squad, chapter, or project.
Yeah.
Absolutely everyone. Yep.
So it's like you said, more than 100 people in the meeting every Monday.
Yep.
For
That's
30
correct.
minutes.
Yep.
Okay,
So probably like on average, there might be 80 people calling in, and the rest might have client things on and they just watch the recordings afterwards.
And is it super structured? So you every day go through the same thing? I mean, every day, every Monday?
It's different, a little bit different. Like there might be a strategy update from the CEO maybe every 4 weeks or something like that, like once a month. And then sometimes there's a mix of demos of recent work and how it went. And sometimes it could be talking about future opportunities. So it all depends, and everyone are able to add something to the agenda depending on how much time is available for that week. It can also be
very much.
Yeah.
It's a platform as well for the this learning bit that Anna mentioned. So you can see there the M, the Monday morning meeting. So this is where we would, if we had some learnings or some learnings that we wanted to share, Monday morning meetings, great opportunity for that.
All right.
Perfect.
Okay, I think we already lost some people due to the timing. So my suggestion would be that we wrap it up. But thank you so much, Anna and Daniel. This was really, really interesting for me. Even if I'm not working in that kind of setup, I could have a lot of takeaways that we can also implement. So thank you for that and for openly sharing. I see a lot of clapping as well, so I think the audience was also happy. Not sure if you want to say any last information. The Miro board, we will also be sharing that in the recording as well. So that everyone can have access to the nice templates. But any final remarks, Anna and Daniel?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Sorry, Anna.
Yeah.
Just thanks so much for your time.
You.
Yeah.
Awesome. It was lovely having you. Thank you also to everyone that made it. I know that the timing might have been a bit challenging, but thank you so much. It was lovely having you in. And yeah, we keep in touch in our Shakers channels. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I just want to say one more thing. Feel free to get in touch on LinkedIn if you have more questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a
Take
great
care.
day ahead.
Yeah.
Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.